What if the greatest breakthrough in galactic history wasn't achieved by the most advanced civilizations, but by a species that still played with toys? What if the key to unlocking technologies that had stumped entire star-spanning empires for millennia lay not in quantum computers or neural interfaces, but in the simple, chaotic creativity of a human child's imagination? The Galactic Council had written off humanity as a curious anomaly, a young race that somehow managed to stumble into space travel despite their apparent obsession with recreational activities and meaningless games. They had no idea that this very trait would soon revolutionize everything they thought they knew about faster-than-light travel. Part 1. The research station Prometheus 7 hung in the void between star systems like a metallic tumor against the cosmic backdrop. Dr. Sarah Chen pressed her face against the observation deck's reinforced viewport, watching the debris field of an ancient civilization drift past in eternal silence. Somewhere in that graveyard of twisted metal and crystalline structures lay the answer to humanity's greatest puzzle, or so the xenoarchaeologists insisted. Still nothing from the primary excavation site, reported Commander Martinez from behind her, his reflection ghost-like in the transparent aluminum. The Kepler expedition team has been silent for 6 hours now. Sarah turned away from the window, her dark eyes reflecting the soft blue glow of the station's emergency lighting. The Prometheus 7 had been running on minimal power for 3 weeks, ever since they discovered the artifact. Every available energy cell was being diverted to the lower decks where the real work was happening, where her 8-year-old daughter Emma was currently driving the entire xenotechnology department absolutely insane. "Have you tried reaching Dr. Vasquez directly?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. The lead xenotech had been just as fascinated by Emma's unconventional approach to the alien device as he was frustrated by it. "He's not responding either. Last I heard, your daughter had somehow managed to make the artifact sing." Emma had always been unusual, even by the standards of children raised in space stations. While other kids her age were content with holographic games and virtual reality experiences, Emma preferred physical objects, the older and more mysterious the better. She had an uncanny ability to understand how things worked simply by playing with them, a trait that had gotten her into trouble more times than Sarah could count. The artifact they'd discovered was unlike anything in the Galactic Council's databases. It was a perfect sphere, roughly 2 meters in diameter, composed of a material that seemed to shift between metal and crystal depending on the viewing angle. More importantly, it was clearly some kind of propulsion system, one that operated on principles completely foreign to current scientific understanding. The human delegation to the Galactic Council had been studying faster-than-light travel for over a century, ever since first contact with the Zephyrians had revealed that humanity's primitive chemical rockets were laughably outdated. Every other species in the galaxy had mastered warp drive technology millennia ago, treating it as casually as humans treated automobiles. But for humanity, the mathematical principles remained stubbornly incomprehensible. The Altarians had tried to help, sharing their technical manuals and offering training programs. The crystalline entities known as the Shapers had even constructed demonstration models, breaking down the process into what they assumed were digestible components. Nothing worked. Human brains, it seemed, were simply wired incorrectly for understanding hyperspatial mechanics. Dr. Kai-Shai Chen, the intercom crackled to life. "Please report to Laboratory 7 immediately. We have a situation." Sarah exchanged glances with Commander Martinez before heading toward the lift. Laboratory 7 was where they'd moved the artifact after the initial scans had proven inconclusive. It was also where she'd reluctantly agreed to let Emma play with the device after conventional analysis had yielded nothing but frustration and burned-out equipment. The corridor leading to Lab 7 hummed with an energy Sarah had never felt before. The walls themselves seemed to vibrate at a frequency just below human hearing, creating an unsettling sensation in her chest. As she approached the reinforced doors, she could hear something that made her stop in her tracks: laughter. Child's laughter mixed with what sounded like musical tones. The laboratory doors slid open to reveal a scene that defied rational explanation. The artifact hung suspended in the center of the room, no longer the dull metallic sphere they'd discovered. Instead, it pulsed with internal light, cycling through colors that had no names in any human language. Geometric patterns flowed across its surface like living things, responding to the movements of a small figure dancing around its perimeter. Emma Chen Okafor was 8 years old, with her mother's dark hair and her father's infectious enthusiasm for discovery. She wore her favorite jumpsuit, the one covered in cartoon rockets and alien characters, and clutched a collection of toys that Sarah recognized from their quarters. A kaleidoscope, a puzzle box, a set of magnetic building blocks, and, strangest of all, a vintage mechanical gyroscope that had belonged to Sarah's grandfather. "Mom!" Emma called out without taking her eyes off the artifact. "Look what it can do when you show it patterns." Dr. Vasquez stood frozen near the observation console, his usually pristine lab coat wrinkled, and his graying hair disheveled. His face bore the expression of a man witnessing something that challenged everything he thought he knew about physics. "Sarah," he whispered, "she's actually communicating with it." "Communicating?" Sarah stepped into the room cautiously, noting that several other research team members were pressed against the far wall, watching Emma with a mixture of awe and terror. "Watch this," Emma said, holding up her kaleidoscope. She peered through the eyepiece, then pointed it at the artifact while slowly rotating the endpiece. The sphere responded immediately, its surface pattern shifting to match the geometric designs visible in the toy. "It's like it's trying to learn," Emma explained matter-of-factly. "But it's been asleep for a really long time, so it's confused about how things work now." "Emma, honey, artifacts don't learn. They're just machines." "This one does," Emma insisted. She set down the kaleidoscope and picked up her puzzle box, an ancient Chinese creation with dozens of moving parts that had to be manipulated in a specific sequence. As she worked through the familiar motions, the artifact began to pulse in rhythm with her movements. "It's trying to remember how to make space smaller." Vasquez finally found his voice. "Sarah, the energy readings we're getting are unlike anything we've ever measured. The artifact is manipulating local space-time in ways that shouldn't be possible with our current understanding of physics, and it's only happening when Emma interacts with it." "That's because you're thinking too hard," Emma said, not unkindly. She'd heard this complaint from adults her entire life. "Toys don't work when you think too hard about them. You have to play." The mechanical gyroscope in Emma's hand began to spin as she wound its cord. The artifact responded with what could only be described as excitement. Its lights brightened and the musical tones grew more complex. Then something extraordinary happened. The spinning motion of the gyroscope seemed to be reflected in the space around the artifact itself. The air began to twist, creating a visible distortion that made Sarah's eyes water. "Emma, step away from the artifact," Sarah commanded, her maternal instincts overriding her scientific curiosity. "It's okay, Mom," Emma replied, but she did take a few steps back. "It's not dangerous. It's just happy to have someone to play with." Dr. Vasquez was frantically recording everything on his portable scanner. "The quantum field fluctuations are stabilizing," he reported. "Whatever she's doing, it's creating a coherent warp bubble. A stable one." Sarah stared at the impossible sight before her. Humanity had been struggling with warp drive technology for over a century. The greatest minds in human space had studied the problem from every conceivable angle, built countless computer models, and conducted thousands of experiments. Yet here was her 8-year-old daughter apparently teaching an alien artifact to warp space using nothing but childhood toys and intuitive play. "Dr. Chen," Commander Martinez's voice came through the intercom, "we're picking up some unusual energy signatures on the long-range sensors. You might want to see this." Sarah reluctantly left the laboratory, but not before instructing Dr. Vasquez to continue monitoring Emma while keeping a safe distance. The command center was buzzing with activity when she arrived, with technicians hunched over displays showing sensor data that made no immediate sense. "What am I looking at?" Sarah asked. "Hyperspace disturbance," Martinez replied. "Multiple contacts moving faster than anything we've ever recorded. They're headed directly for our position." "How long until they arrive? At current velocity? Maybe 6 hours?" The implications were staggering. The artifact's activation had apparently sent some kind of signal across the galaxy. alerting unknown parties to its location. Given the technology level required to build such a device in the first place, whoever was coming was likely far more advanced than humanity. The question was whether they would view the artifact's reactivation as a theft or a miracle. Back in Laboratory 7, Emma continued her strange dance with the alien sphere. She had moved on to her magnetic building blocks, constructing impossible structures that somehow maintained their shape despite defying several laws of physics. The artifact watched her work with what could only be called fascination, its surface patterns becoming increasingly complex as it tried to understand the logic behind her creations. "It's learning so fast," Emma murmured, more to herself than to the adults watching her. "I think it wants to go home, but it forgot how. Maybe if I show it more patterns." She reached for her final toy, a simple wooden top that her grandmother had given her years ago. It was carved with intricate designs that seemed to flow and change depending on how the light hit them. As Emma set it spinning on the laboratory floor, the artifact's response was immediate and dramatic. The entire research station shuddered as gravitational waves rippled outward from Laboratory 7. Emergency klaxons began blaring as systems throughout the Prometheus 7 registered impossible readings. The artificial gravity fluctuated, causing everyone in the lab to grab onto nearby surfaces for stability. "Emma!" Sarah's voice came through the intercom from the command center. "What's happening down there?" "I think it remembers now," Emma called back, her voice filled with wonder as she watched the artifact rise from its suspension field and begin to rotate slowly in the air. "It knows how to make the big distances small again." The wooden top continued to spin on the floor, its carved patterns seeming to move independently of its rotation. The artifact pulsed in perfect synchronization with the toy. When the top finally slowed and toppled over, the artifact settled gently back into its suspension field, but everything about it had changed. Where before it had been dark and inert, now it glowed with a soft, steady light. The surface patterns had resolved into something that looked almost like a star chart, with lines of force connecting distant points in three-dimensional space. Most importantly, it was generating a stable warp field that registered on every sensor in the station. Dr. Vasquez approached the artifact with scientific instruments, his hands shaking with excitement. "Sarah," he called through the intercom, "I'm reading coherent subspace distortions. This is it. This is actual functional warp drive technology." But Emma was no longer paying attention to the artifact. Instead, she was looking up at the ceiling with a puzzled expression. "Mom," she said quietly, "I think someone's coming to visit." As if summoned by her words, the station's long-range sensors detected the arrival of the unknown contacts. Ships began dropping out of hyperspace in perfect formation around the Prometheus 7, their designs unlike anything in the Galactic Council's databases. They were elegant and organic-looking, as if grown rather than built, and they pulsed with the same soft light that now emanated from the artifact. "This is Commander Martinez to all stations," the captain's voice echoed through the research vessel. "We are being hailed by the unknown vessels. They're requesting permission to come aboard." Sarah hurried back to Laboratory 7, where she found Emma carefully packing her toys back into their carrying case. "Did you know they were coming?" Sarah asked her daughter. Emma nodded solemnly. "The artifact told me." "Well, not with words, but it showed me pictures. They've been looking for it for a very long time. They're excited that someone finally figured out how to wake it up." "And you're not scared?" Emma considered this question seriously. "No," she said finally. "They feel curious, like me. I think they want to understand how I did it." The first shuttle arrived 30 minutes later, carrying 3 beings unlike any species humanity had encountered before. They were tall and graceful, with elongated limbs and faces that seemed to shift subtly in the light. Their skin had an opalescent quality that reminded Sarah of the artifact's surface patterns, and their large eyes held an intelligence that was both ancient and childlike. The leader of the delegation introduced themselves through a translation device that somehow converted their musical language into perfect English. "I am Keeper Seleneth of the Builder's Archive. We have traveled far to witness the awakening of the memory sphere. We did not expect to find that a youngling had accomplished what our greatest scholars believed impossible. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward, still clutching his scanner. We've been studying the artifact for weeks, but we couldn't activate it until my colleague's daughter began playing with it. Keeper Selenith's attention shifted to Emma, who stood beside her collection of toys with the confidence of a child who had never learned to fear the unknown. You are the one who taught the memory sphere to sing again. It was sleeping and having bad dreams. I just showed it how to play. Playing makes everything better. The alien's expression shifted into something that might have been a smile. Indeed it does, young one. Your species continues to surprise us. You know about humans? Sarah asked. We have been observing your people since you first achieved faster-than-light communication, Selenith replied. Your approach to problem-solving is unique. Where other species rely on accumulated knowledge and rigid protocols, humans employ something our language translates as creative chaos. It is a quality we thought had been lost to the galaxy long ago. Emma tugged on her mother's sleeve. Mom, they want to show us something. The artifact isn't just a drive, it's like a library, a really big one with stories from all over the galaxy. Seleneth's translator struggled with their response, producing a sound like musical laughter. The youngling perceives truly. The memory spheres were created by our predecessors as repositories of knowledge, but they require a specific type of consciousness to access their contents, one that thinks in patterns rather than formulas, that sees connections where others see only chaos. And you think humans have this type of consciousness? Sarah asked. Not all humans, Selenith admitted, but some. Those who retain the ability to play, to experiment, to approach the unknown with joy rather than fear. This quality becomes rarer as species advance technologically. Most civilizations lose it entirely by the time they achieve interstellar travel. Dr. Vasquez looked confused. But surely advanced civilizations are more capable of complex problem-solving. More capable of complex rule-following, Selenith corrected. But the memory spheres do not respond to rules. They respond to intuition, to playfulness, to the willingness to try impossible things simply to see what happens. Your daughter possesses this quality in abundance. Emma had wandered back over to the artifact, which was still pulsing gently with internal light. As she approached, the patterns on its surface shifted to form what looked like a welcoming gesture. It wants to show me the places it's been, she announced, all the different worlds and the people who lived there. Can it do that, Mom? Sarah looked at Keeper Selenith, who nodded encouragingly. The memory spheres were designed to share knowledge, not to hoard it. If the youngling can maintain the connection she has established, she could access information that predates most of our current civilizations. But is it safe? Sarah's maternal instincts were still on high alert despite the alien's apparent friendliness. Safer than most forms of learning, Selenith assured her. The memory spheres filter information through play and story rather than direct neural interface. They teach through experience rather than data transfer. Emma had already made up her mind. She approached the artifact and placed her small hands on its surface. The response was immediate, the laboratory filled with light and sound as the sphere began projecting holographic images that told the story of its creation and journey through space. Sarah watched in amazement as her daughter became the conduit for knowledge that spanned millions of years and countless civilizations. Emma laughed and clapped as she watched the rise and fall of galactic empires, the birth and death of stars, and the endless dance of species discovering each other across the vast reaches of space. But more than just history, the memory sphere was sharing something else, the fundamental principles behind its own operation, not as mathematical formulas or engineering specifications, but as stories and games and puzzles that Emma's young mind could grasp intuitively. She's learning how to build them, Dr. Vasquez whispered in awe as his scanners detected Emma's brainwaves synchronizing with the artifact's energy patterns. She's actually learning how to construct warp drive technology. As we hoped, the memory spheres were scattered throughout the galaxy as seeds of knowledge waiting for minds capable of understanding their gifts. Your daughter may be the first in millennia to truly comprehend their teachings, The holographic display shifted, showing Emma herself as seen through the artifact's perception. She appeared as a small figure surrounded by swirling patterns of possibility, her consciousness extending through dimensions that normal humans couldn't perceive. Her toys scattered around the laboratory glowed with the same gentle light as the memory sphere, as if they too had been touched by ancient wisdom. "This is just the beginning," Emma said softly, her young voice carrying an odd resonance as she maintained her connection with the artifact. "There are so many stories to learn, so many games to play, and they all want to teach us how to make the stars close together." Sarah felt a mixture of pride and fear as she watched her daughter commune with technology that could revolutionize human civilization. The little girl who still needed help tying her shoes had somehow become the bridge between humanity and knowledge that spanned the galaxy. Outside the research station, more ships continued to arrive, not just the organic vessels of the builders, but craft from dozens of other species drawn by the memory sphere's awakening. The galaxy, it seemed, had been waiting a very long time for someone to remember how to play with the stars themselves. As the first day of this new chapter in human history drew to a close, Emma finally stepped back from the memory sphere, her eyes bright with wonder and her mind filled with impossible dreams made real. The artifact settled into a gentle dormancy, but its surface patterns continued to pulse softly, as if it were content for the first time in eons. "When can we start building our own?" Emma asked Keeper Seleneth, as if constructing faster-than-light drives was as simple as assembling toys. The alien's translator produced what might have been a chuckle. "Soon, youngling." "Very soon. But first you must learn to play with the smaller patterns before you can reshape the cosmos itself." Emma nodded seriously, already reaching for her kaleidoscope. "That makes sense. You always have to start with the little games before you can play the big ones." And in that simple statement, spoken by a child surrounded by the greatest minds in the galaxy, lay the key to everything humanity was about to become. ##. Part 2. 3 months had passed since the awakening of the memory sphere, and the research station Prometheus 7 had transformed into something resembling a galactic university. Representatives from 47 different species had arrived to witness what the Galactic Council was calling the human anomaly, the first successful activation of builder technology in over 50,000 years. Sarah Chen stood in the expanded Laboratory 7, watching her daughter work with a collection of alien visitors who had quickly learned that traditional scientific methods were useless when it came to understanding Emma's techniques. The laboratory itself had been redesigned according to Emma's specifications, with curved walls that seemed to flow like liquid metal and surfaces that responded to touch with gentle musical tones. Emma, now 9 years old, had grown into her role as humanity's unofficial ambassador to technologies that defied conventional understanding. She sat cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by what she called her thinking toys, a collection that had expanded far beyond her original kaleidoscope and building blocks to include artifacts and devices gifted by various alien species. "The crystalline entities from Altair brought you this," Vasquez said, carefully setting down a structure that looked like frozen music, transparent geometric forms that chimed softly when the light hit them at certain angles. "They say it's a harmonic resonator, but they have no idea how it works. It's been dormant for as long as their species has existed." Emma's eyes lit up as she examined the crystalline structure. "Ooh. It's like a puzzle made of songs," she said, gently touching one of the transparent facets. The entire structure responded with a cascade of tones that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. It wants to remember how to make space sing along with it, their opalescent form moving with the fluid grace that characterized all builder technology. In the months since first contact, they had become something of a mentor to Emma, though they insisted the relationship was more collaborative than instructional. "The youngling sees truly," Seleneth said, their translator converting musical speech into English. The Altarians' ancestors were master harmonicists, capable of manipulating matter at the quantum level through pure sound, but they evolved beyond the need for such tools, believing logic and mathematics to be superior to intuitive creation. Emma was already working with the crystalline structure, humming softly as she rearranged its components. The device responded to her touch like a living thing, its internal geometry shifting to match the melody she carried. "It's not about the math," she explained to the gathered scientists. "It's about feeling how the pieces want to fit together. Everything in space wants to sing, but most people forgot how to listen." Reyes from the Xenobiology department stepped forward with her recorder running. "Emma, can you explain what you mean by space wants to sing?" "We're still trying to understand the fundamental principles behind what you're doing."
Emma paused in her work, considering how to translate her intuitive understanding into words that adults could grasp.
"Well, you know how when you drop a stone in water it makes ripples." "Yes, that's basic wave propagation," Dr. Reyes confirmed. "Space is like that, but with everything. When you move, when you think, when you play, it all makes ripples. Most people try to fight the ripples or ignore them, but if you play with them instead, you can make bigger ripples that carry you to other places." The assembled scientists exchanged glances. Emma's explanation was simultaneously profound and childishly simple, describing concepts that their most advanced theoretical models could barely approximate. Yet when she demonstrated these principles with her toys and artifacts, the results spoke for themselves. The crystalline structure in Emma's hands had begun to glow with internal light, its harmonic shifting into patterns that made the air itself seem to dance. Suddenly, small objects around the laboratory began to levitate, caught up in the resonance field that Emma had somehow coaxed from the device. "Remarkable," breathed Dr. Petrov from the physics department. "She's created a localized gravity distortion using nothing but acoustic manipulation. The energy requirements alone should be impossible." "That's because you're still thinking about energy the wrong way," Emma said matter-of-factly. "You don't need to make energy. You just need to ask nicely if you can borrow some from the space around you." One got it all. "Space has lots of energy. It likes to share if you're polite about it." Keeper Seleneth's translator produced what might have been appreciative laughter. The builders of our era would have spent centuries developing mathematical proofs for such insights. The youngling simply asks space to play, and it agrees. The morning session was interrupted by an announcement from Commander Martinez. "Dr. Chen, please report to the command center. We've received a priority transmission from Earth." Sarah reluctantly left her daughter's demonstration and made her way to the command deck, where a holographic display showed the familiar face of Admiral Foster from Earth's Space Command. His expression was grave, and Sarah immediately knew that the political implications of Emma's discoveries had finally reached the highest levels of human government. "Dr. Chen," the Admiral began without preamble, "I need to speak with you about your daughter's activities. We've been monitoring the situation through your regular reports, and there are concerns about the potential security implications." Sarah had been dreading this conversation for weeks. "What kind of concerns, Admiral?" "The technology your daughter is accessing could revolutionize human civilization, but it could also be weaponized by hostile parties. We need to discuss bringing her back to Earth for more controlled study." "Emma isn't a weapon, Admiral. She's a child who happens to have an intuitive understanding of advanced physics. Removing her from this environment could set back human progress by decades." "That may be," Admiral Foster replied. "But we also have reports that several non-council species have been requesting access to her demonstrations. Species that we know very little about, some of which may not have humanity's best interests at heart." The political balance of the galaxy had been stable for millennia precisely because faster-than-light technology was so widely distributed that no single species held a significant advantage. Emma's ability to not just operate but apparently improve upon existing warp drive technology could upset that balance dramatically. "What are you proposing?" Sarah asked. "A controlled environment on Earth where Emma can continue her work under proper security protocols. We'd provide her with replicas of the artifacts she's been studying and ensure that any technological advances benefit humanity first." The transmission ended, leaving Sarah with a decision that could affect the future of human-alien relations. She returned to Laboratory 7 to find Emma in deep conversation with a new arrival, a being that looked like living shadow wrapped in starlight. Sarah had never seen anything like it before. "Mom!" Emma called out excitedly. "This is Whisper of Distant Stars. They're from a place that doesn't have a name because it's between all the other places. They brought me something really special." The shadow being communicated through direct telepathic contact, its thoughts appearing in Sarah's mind as concepts rather than words. "We have observed the youngling's awakening of the ancient memories. She possesses a gift that we had thought lost forever, the ability to perceive the true nature of existence itself." "What do you mean?" Sarah asked aloud. "Reality is not fixed," came the response. "It is a story that tells itself, and those with the proper understanding can suggest new chapters. Your offspring does this instinctively, reshaping the fundamental forces through what you call play." Emma was examining the gift that Whisper of Distant Stars had brought, a sphere of what looked like crystallized void, darker than black but somehow still visible. "It's a piece of the space between spaces," Emma explained. "The empty parts that hold everything together. If I can figure out how it works, maybe I can teach people how to make shortcuts that don't need ships at all." Sarah felt a growing sense of unease. The implications of what Emma was describing went far beyond improved transportation. If her daughter could manipulate the fundamental structure of space-time itself, she would essentially become the most powerful being in the galaxy. "Emma, honey, we need to talk about something important," Sarah said, gently guiding her daughter away from the group of alien observers. They found privacy in Sarah's quarters, where Emma's collection of Earth toys looked strangely mundane compared to the cosmic artifacts she'd been working with. Emma sensed her mother's concern and set down the shadow sphere carefully on the desk. "You're worried about what the people back home are going to think," Emma said with the perceptiveness that had always startled Sarah. "Admiral Foster wants us to return to Earth. He thinks you'd be safer there and that humanity needs to understand your abilities better." Emma was quiet for a long moment, staring out the viewport at the alien ships that had become a permanent fixture around the research station. "Would I have to stop playing with the memory spheres?" "I don't know," Sarah admitted. "Maybe for a while." "But Mom, I'm just starting to understand the really big patterns. The memory spheres aren't just about making ships go fast, they're about understanding how everything connects to everything else. If I stop now, I might forget the important parts." Sarah sat down beside her daughter, struggling with feelings of protectiveness and ambition. Emma's discoveries could make humanity one of the most powerful species in the galaxy, but at what cost to the child herself? "What do you want to do, Em?" "I want to keep learning," Emma said simply. "But I also want to teach other people how to play the way I do. Not just humans, everybody." The memory spheres were meant to share knowledge, not hoard it. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent chime from Sarah's communication panel. Dr. Vasquez's voice came through with barely controlled excitement. "Sarah, you need to see this. Emma's demonstration with the Alterian harmonic resonator has created some kind of cascade effect. The other artifacts in the laboratory are beginning to activate spontaneously." Sarah and Emma hurried back to Laboratory 7 to find controlled chaos. The memory sphere was pulsing in rhythm with the crystalline harmonic resonator, while the shadow sphere hovered above them both, creating geometric patterns in the air itself. Other artifacts that had been dormant for centuries were beginning to show signs of activity, as if Emma's presence had awakened something fundamental within them. Keeper Selenith approached with their characteristic flowing movement. "The youngling has achieved something unprecedented," they reported. "She has created a resonance cascade that is awakening the Builder network itself. Artifacts across this entire sector of the galaxy are beginning to respond." "Is that good or bad?" Sarah asked. "Unknown," Selenith admitted. "Such a thing has not occurred since the Builders themselves transcended physical existence." The implications are, their translator struggled for a moment before settling on significant. Emma walked calmly through the chaos of awakening artifacts, each one responding to her proximity with gentle light and musical tones. They're all connected, she explained to the amazed observers, like notes in a really big song that was interrupted a long time ago. I think I accidentally helped them remember the melody. Vasquez was frantically recording everything with every scanner he had available. The quantum entanglement signatures are off the charts, he reported. It's as if these artifacts are communicating instantaneously across vast distances. Because they are, Emma said matter-of-factly. That's how the big pattern works. Distance is just a story we tell ourselves about how far apart things are. But really, everything that was ever connected stays connected forever. As if to prove her point, the station's long-range sensors began detecting new arrivals. Ships from across the galaxy, all heading toward the research station at maximum velocity. The awakening of the Builder network had sent signals that could be detected from hundreds of light-years away, and every advanced civilization in the galaxy wanted to understand what was happening. Commander Martinez's voice came over the intercom with barely controlled stress. Dr. Chen, we've got incoming vessels from at least 20 different species, including several that aren't part of the Galactic Council. Some of these signatures don't match anything in our databases. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Her daughter's innocent play with alien artifacts had apparently triggered events that could reshape galactic civilization. The question was whether humanity was ready for that level of responsibility. Emma, she said carefully, do you understand what's happening? Emma looked up from the shadow-sphere, which was now projecting miniature galaxies in the space above her hands. I woke up something that was sleeping, she said. Something really, really old that remembers when things were different. I think it wants to teach everyone how to play together the way we're supposed to. Whisper of distant stars communicated directly to both Sarah and Emma. The youngling speaks truly. The network she has awakened was designed by the builders as a teaching system, a way to share knowledge and understanding across all barriers of species and time. But it requires participants who can approach existence as play rather than conquest. And if people can't do that, Sarah asked, then the network will remain dormant until those who can are ready to receive its gifts, came the reply. The builders were wise in their safeguards. The first of the approaching vessels dropped out of hyperspace near the research station, and Sarah was relieved to see that it bore the markings of the Zephyrian Science Collective, one of humanity's oldest allies in the Galactic Council. Captain Zarval's distinctive blue-scaled face appeared on the main viewer, his expression mixing curiosity with concern. Dr. Chen, he began with formal courtesy, the collective has detected massive builder network activity originating from your position. Are you in need of assistance? We're fine, Captain, Sarah replied, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. My daughter has successfully activated several builder artifacts, and they appear to be communicating with others across the galaxy. Captain Zarval's expression shifted to one of amazement. A human child has awakened the builder network? This is unprecedented. The collective would very much like to send a delegation to observe. Of course, Sarah agreed, knowing that refusing would only create more problems. But I should warn you that the situation is still developing. We're not entirely sure what we're dealing with ourselves. More ships continue to arrive throughout the day, creating an impromptu gathering of galactic civilizations. The Altarian crystal ships arrived with their characteristic silence, while the Terran Federation sent their newest exploration vessel. Even the reclusive void dancers appeared, their ships looking more like living creatures than constructed vessels. Each delegation brought their own artifacts and questions, hoping that Emma's unique abilities could unlock secrets that their civilizations had been pursuing for millennia. The research station was quickly overwhelmed by the sheer volume of requests for demonstrations and explanations. Emma, for her part, seemed to take the attention in stride. She worked with each delegation patiently, showing them how their own artifacts could be awakened through play rather than analysis. Not every species could replicate her intuitive approach, but many began to understand the fundamental principles she was demonstrating. The key is not to force the technology to work, Emma explained to a group of crystalline entities whose harmonic resonators had remained silent for centuries. You have to ask it what it wants to do, then help it remember how to do that. Like this. She placed her small hands on their resonator and began humming softly. The crystalline structure responded gradually, its internal geometry shifting until it produced a single pure note that seemed to encompass the entire spectrum of sound. The crystalline entities themselves began to resonate in harmony, their bodies producing complementary tones that turned the laboratory into a living symphony. We had forgotten one of them communicated through harmonic vibrations that the translation systems rendered as whispered awe. We became so focused on efficiency and logic that we lost the ability to simply listen to what the universe was trying to tell us. Emma nodded seriously. That happens to lots of people when they get really smart. They forget how to be curious about things they don't understand yet. But curiosity is what makes everything work. The day's revelations were interrupted by an urgent communication from Admiral Foster on Earth. His holographic image appeared in the command center with an expression that Sarah had learned to associate with political crisis. Dr. Chen, the situation has escalated beyond our initial concerns, he began. We've been monitoring the galactic response to your daughter's activities, and there are factions within several major civilizations that view humanity's access to builder technology as a potential threat to galactic stability. What kind of threat? Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. The kind that could lead to preemptive action against human space if not handled carefully, Admiral Foster replied grimly. We need Emma back on Earth immediately, along with any builder artifacts she's been working with. Earth's security depends on it. Sarah felt the familiar tension between her roles as mother and scientist. Admiral, removing Emma from this environment could disrupt the progress she's made with dozens of alien species. We're on the verge of breakthrough discoveries that could benefit all of galactic civilization. And we're also on the verge of a war that could destroy human civilization entirely, the Admiral countered. The hegemony of rigid order has already filed formal protests with the Galactic Council, claiming that primitive species should not have access to technologies they can't fully understand. The hegemony protests everything, Sarah replied, but she could see the political writing on the wall. How long do we have? Transport ships are already en route to your position. They'll arrive within 72 hours. The transmission ended, leaving Sarah with an impossible choice. She could comply with Earth's demands and potentially cripple humanity's greatest technological breakthrough, or she could resist and risk triggering the very conflict that Admiral Foster was trying to prevent. Emma found her mother in the observation lounge later that evening, staring out at the collection of alien ships that had gathered around their small research station. You're thinking about the choice again, Emma said, settling beside Sarah on the curved bench. How did you know? The memory sphere showed me. Not the future exactly, but the patterns that choices make, like ripples in a pond, but with time instead of water. Sarah looked at her daughter with a mixture of pride and sadness. In just a few months, Emma had grown from a curious child into something approaching a cosmic force. But she was still 9 years old, still Sarah's little girl who needed protection from forces beyond her understanding. Emma, what would happen if we went back to Earth? Would you lose your connection to the builder artifacts? I don't think so, Emma replied thoughtfully. The connection isn't really in the artifacts themselves, it's in the way of thinking about them. But, she paused, choosing her words carefully. I think the artifacts would go back to sleep if I left them alone for too long, and some of the friends I've made might not be able to visit Earth. What about the other option? What if we stayed here? Then the scared people would probably try to stop us from playing with the artifacts, and that would make everyone sad because the artifacts want to teach, not hurt anyone. Sarah realized that her 9-year-old daughter had grasped the political implications of their situation with startling clarity. So what do you think we should do? Emma was quiet for a long moment, watching the alien ships through the viewport. When she spoke, her voice carried an unusual gravity. I think maybe there's a third choice that nobody's thought of yet. What if instead of taking the artifacts to Earth or keeping them here, we taught other people how to play with them in their own homes? You mean distribute builder technology throughout the galaxy? Not the technology exactly, but the way of thinking that makes the technology work, like teaching everyone the same games instead of keeping all the toys in one place. Emma's suggestion was audacious in its simplicity. Instead of hoarding builder knowledge for humanity's benefit or letting it remain centralized on the research station, they could democratize the very principles that made such technology possible. That's actually brilliant, Sarah admitted. If every species had access to builder principles, no one would have an advantage over anyone else. The balance of power wouldn't shift. Plus, everyone would get to play, Emma added, as if that were the most important consideration of all, and perhaps, Sarah realized, it was. Part 3. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened on the neutral space station Concordia, a massive structure that had served as the diplomatic heart of galactic civilization for over 3,000 years. Representatives from 47 member species filled the circular chamber, their various forms of communication creating a symphony of languages that the universal translators worked overtime to process. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the central podium, acutely aware that the next few hours could determine humanity's place in the galaxy. Beside her, Emma sat cross-legged on the floor with her collection of toys, seemingly oblivious to the political tension that filled the chamber. In her lap, she cradled the original memory sphere, which pulsed with gentle light in response to her presence. The Council recognizes Dr. Sarah Chen of the Human Delegation, announced Arbiter Veltharian, a crystalline being whose voice resonated through the chamber like wind chimes. You may present your proposal. Sarah took a deep breath and activated the holographic display that would illustrate their revolutionary idea. Honored representatives, we come before you today with a proposal that could benefit all galactic civilizations equally. Rather than restricting access to builder technology or allowing any single species to monopolize it, we suggest a new approach, teaching the fundamental principles that make such technology possible to anyone willing to learn. The hegemony of rigid order's representative, an imposing figure whose mechanical form towered over the other delegates, was the first to respond. The human delegation speaks of sharing technology that they barely understand themselves, the hegemony speaker announced, their voice carrying the flat authority of absolute certainty. How can a species that has only recently achieved interstellar flight presume to teach others about cosmic forces that have challenged our greatest minds for millennia? Emma looked up from her toys with the kind of patient expression that adults often mistake for innocence. "'Cause sometimes the greatest minds make things harder than they need to be," she said clearly, her young voice carrying throughout the chamber despite the lack of amplification. The assembled delegates fell silent, startled by the child's interruption. Emma stood up, still holding the memory sphere, and walked to the center of the chamber. "May I show them, Mom?" Sarah nodded, though her heart was racing. Emma had insisted that the best way to explain their proposal was through demonstration. But the political risk was enormous. If something went wrong in front of the entire Galactic Council, it could doom humanity's relationship with every other species in the galaxy. Emma placed the memory sphere on the floor and reached into her pocket for her kaleidoscope, the same simple toy that had started everything months ago. "Everyone thinks builder technology is really complicated," she began, addressing the assembled representatives as if they were classmates rather than the most powerful beings in the galaxy. "But it's not. It's just about seeing patterns that connect everything together." She peered through the kaleidoscope, slowly turning it to create shifting geometric patterns. The memory sphere responded immediately, its surface beginning to mirror the kaleidoscope's designs. But more than that, something extraordinary began to happen throughout the chamber. The various communication devices used by different species, translators, harmonic resonators, quantum entanglement communicators, all began to synchronize with the memory sphere's patterns. For the first time in the history of the Galactic Council, every being in the chamber could understand every other being directly, without the need for technological translation. "You see?" Emma said, her words somehow reaching every consciousness in the room in their own native language. "Connection isn't about machines or math or being really smart. It's about playing with the patterns until you find the ones that fit together naturally." The delegate from the Zephyrian Science Collective stood up, their blue scales shimmering with excitement. The youngling has created a universal communication field, using nothing but basic pattern resonance. Our scientists have been trying to develop such technology for centuries. Because your scientists are thinking like scientists, Emma replied with the devastating honesty of childhood. But the patterns don't care about science. They just want to play. Keeper Seleneth of the Builder's Archive materialized in the chamber through means that no other species had ever understood. Their opalescent forms seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and their presence always made the air itself feel more alive. The youngling speaks the ancient truths, Seleneth confirmed, their musical language now understandable to every consciousness present. The builders created their technologies not through rigid formulas, but through what they termed conscious play, the ability to interact with fundamental forces as if they were sentient beings capable of choice and preference. Such anthropomorphization of natural forces is scientifically absurd. The universe operates according to immutable laws, not preferences. Does it? Emma asked innocently. She picked up another of her toys, a simple wooden top carved with flowing designs. As she set it spinning, reality around the chamber began to shift subtly. The rigid geometric architecture of the council chamber started to flow like liquid, rearranging itself into patterns that were somehow more pleasing to the eye and more comfortable for all the various physiologies present. The universe has preferences, Emma explained as delegates watched their environment reshape itself around them. It prefers beauty over ugliness, harmony over discord, connection over isolation. Most people just never ask what it wants. The top continued spinning, and gradually every being in the chamber began to feel something unprecedented, a direct awareness of the cosmic forces that connected all life throughout the galaxy. They could sense the gravitational songs of distant stars, the quantum conversations between particles separated by light years, and the vast, patient intelligence that seemed to underlie reality itself. "This is impossible," whispered the delegate from the Altarian collective, their crystalline form resonating with harmonics that made their words sound like music. "We are experiencing direct perception of the quantum substrate." Our most advanced meditation techniques require years of training to achieve even glimpses of such awareness. "It's not impossible," Emma replied, catching the wooden top as it slowed. "It's just play. Everything in the universe wants to play, but most people are too serious to notice." Vasquez, who had been monitoring the demonstration with every scanner available to human science, stepped forward with his readings. "The energy requirements for what we just experienced should have been astronomical," he reported to the chamber. "But according to our instruments, Emma drew no external power at all. She simply asked reality to cooperate, and it did." The implications were staggering. If Emma's approach could be learned and taught, it would revolutionize not just transportation technology, but the entire understanding of how consciousness relates to physical law. More importantly, it would give every species in the galaxy access to capabilities that had previously been reserved for the most advanced civilizations. The representative from the Void Dancers spoke for the first time, their shadow form communicating through direct dot transmission. The small one demonstrates the ancient art of existence shaping. We had thought all knowledge of such practices lost when the builders transcended physical reality. "Not lost," Emma corrected, "just forgotten, like a game that nobody played for so long that they stopped remembering the rules." Arbiter Veltharian's crystalline form chimed softly as they processed this information. If what the youngling demonstrates can truly be learned by others, it would represent the most significant advancement in galactic civilization since the development of faster-than-light communication. "But there must be safeguards," interjected the hegemony representative. "Power of this magnitude cannot be distributed without proper controls and oversight." Emma looked at the mechanical being with the kind of patience usually reserved for explaining obvious things to confused adults. "That's the really cool part," she said. "The universe built in its own safeguards. The patterns only work if you approach them with love and curiosity and respect." If you try to use them to hurt people or control things, they just stop working. To demonstrate, Emma attempted to use her spinning top to create a small distortion in the chamber's artificial gravity, but this time with the intention of making one of the delegates uncomfortable. Nothing happened. The top spun normally, generating no reality-altering effects at all. The consciousness of the practitioner is part of the pattern, Keeper Seleneth explained. The builders designed their technologies to respond only to minds that approached existence as a collaborative rather than domineering act. It is impossible to weaponize such tools because the very intention to do so breaks the fundamental harmony required for their operation. This revelation sent waves of discussion throughout the chamber. A technology that could not be used for conquest or oppression would indeed change the balance of galactic power, but in a way that elevated all civilizations rather than empowering some at the expense of others. The delegate from the Terran Federation stood to address the chamber. While humanity is honored by our daughter's unique abilities, we want to make clear that we do not seek exclusive access to builder knowledge. Our proposal is to establish a galactic education initiative that would teach these principles to any species willing to learn them. And who would oversee such an initiative? Asked the representative from the Crystalline Collective. What safeguards would prevent any single species from distorting the teachings for their own benefit? Emma raised her hand like she was in school. Actually, that's easy. The memory spheres themselves can teach, not just one or two, but lots of them. Keeper Seleneth said there are thousands scattered throughout the galaxy, all waiting for people who know how to play with them. Seleneth confirmed this with a harmonic pattern that felt like cosmic laughter. Indeed, the Builder Network contains over 7,000 active memory spheres, each capable of serving as a teaching node. They require no oversight because they respond only to sincere curiosity and respectful approach. They are, in essence, self-regulating. Dr. Sarah Chen saw the opportunity and seized it. We propose the establishment of memory sphere academies throughout the galaxy. Any species, any individual would be free to attend and learn at their own pace. The spheres themselves would determine when students are ready for advanced knowledge, eliminating the need for bureaucratic oversight. The chamber erupted in discussion as delegates considered the implications. Some species were excited by the prospect of unlimited access to cosmic knowledge, while others worried about the disruption such widespread education might cause to existing power structures. The hegemony representative was the most vocal opponent. This proposal would fundamentally destabilize galactic civilization. If every individual has access to reality-shaping capabilities, the result would be chaos. Would it? Emma asked, genuinely curious. She had been listening to the debate with the serious attention of a child trying to understand adult concerns. Why would people use the patterns to make chaos? Chaos isn't fun to play with. It's hard and messy and makes everyone sad. Because beings seek advantage over other beings, the hegemony delegate replied. It is the fundamental nature of existence to compete for limited resources. Emma considered this seriously, then shook her head. But the patterns show that resources aren't really limited. There's more energy and space and possibility than anyone could ever use. The only thing that makes them seem limited is when people forget that sharing makes everything bigger instead of smaller. She picked up her magnetic building blocks, the same toys she'd used to first communicate with the memory sphere months ago. As she built impossible structures that seemed to support themselves through pure aesthetic appeal, she continued speaking. When I play with one toy, I have fun. When I play with friends, we all have more fun than any of us had alone. That's how the universe works too. Connection creates more of everything instead of less. The structure Emma was building began to resonate with the memory sphere, and suddenly every delegate in the chamber could feel a direct demonstration of her words. They experienced the sensation of consciousness expanding through connection rather than contracting through isolation, of resources multiplying through sharing rather than diminishing through hoarding. Even the hegemony representative seemed affected by this experience. Their mechanical form underwent subtle changes as internal systems that had been rigidly isolated began to integrate and harmonize. This is unexpected, they admitted. Our models had not accounted for the exponential effects of collaborative consciousness. The transformation spreading through the chamber was remarkable. Delegates who had maintained formal diplomatic distance for centuries were beginning to communicate directly, sharing thoughts and feelings without the need for translation or protocol. The artificial barriers between species were dissolving in the face of Emma's demonstration that consciousness was fundamentally collaborative rather than competitive. Arbiter Veltharion chimed with what might have been amazement. The youngling has accomplished in minutes what diplomatic efforts have failed to achieve in millennia: genuine understanding between previously incompatible forms of consciousness. Because diplomacy is still about trying to get what you want without giving up what you have, Emma explained. But real friendship is about finding out what everyone wants and then figuring out how to make it happen together. The Void Dancers' representative manifested more solidly than anyone had ever seen them do, their shadow form taking on substance as they experienced unprecedented connection with physical reality. The small one speaks of the unity beyond separation that our people have sought through eons of meditation. She achieves through play what we have pursued through suffering. Emma looked up at the shadow being with interest. Maybe that's why it didn't work. The universe doesn't like suffering. It wants everyone to be happy and curious and creative. When you try to find connection through being sad, you're asking the wrong question. The implications of this observation rippled through the chamber as species after species began to reconsider fundamental assumptions about consciousness, reality, and the nature of existence itself. The rigid theological and philosophical frameworks that had divided galactic civilization for millennia were being gently dissolved by the simple logic of a child who saw no reason why everyone couldn't be friends. Commander Martinez's voice came through the chamber's communication system, interrupting the philosophical revolution taking place.
Dr. Chen, we're receiving multiple priority transmissions from Earth. Admiral Foster is demanding immediate response.
Sarah reluctantly stepped away from the incredible scene of interspecies harmony to take the communication in a private channel. Admiral Foster's face appeared on the screen with an expression of barely controlled anger. Dr. Chen, what exactly is happening at that council session? Our monitoring stations are detecting energy signatures that suggest your daughter has somehow affected the consciousness of every being present. Sarah replied carefully. The response has been enthusiastic enough that preliminary reports suggest she may have fundamentally altered the political structure of galactic civilization in the space of an hour, Admiral Foster snapped. Do you have any idea what the implications of that might be for human security? Where Emma was now leading what appeared to be an impromptu game involving delegates from dozens of species working together to create something beautiful from the combined resources of their different technologies. I think the implications might be better than anyone imagined, Admiral. Or catastrophically worse, Foster replied grimly. We're accelerating the timeline for your return to Earth. Transport ships will arrive at the Council Station within 12 hours. Admiral, with respect, removing Emma from this environment now could disrupt the most significant breakthrough in galactic relations since the formation of the Council itself. And leaving her there could result in humanity becoming a footnote in someone else's empire, Foster shot back. 12 hours, Dr. Chen. That's not a request. The transmission ended, leaving Sarah with the familiar impossible choice. But as she watched her daughter facilitate unprecedented cooperation between species that had barely tolerated each other for millennia, she realized that the choice might not be hers to make. Emma looked up from the collaborative art project that had somehow grown to encompass the entire chamber. Every delegate was participating in building something that none of them could have imagined alone, a structure that existed partly in physical space, partly in harmonic frequency, and partly in pure conscious intention. Mom, Emma called out, I think we need to talk about going home soon. But first, everyone wants to learn how to make memory spheres of their own. Would that be okay? The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything humanity thought it understood about its place in the galaxy. Emma wasn't just offering to share builder technology. She was proposing to teach every civilization in the galaxy how to become builders themselves. And judging by the expressions of wonder and excitement on every face in the chamber, the galaxy was ready to accept that offer. Part 4. The first human transport ships arrived at Concordia Station exactly 12 hours later, their sleek military designs contrasting sharply with the organic curves and flowing lines that characterized most galactic architecture. Admiral Foster himself led the delegation, accompanied by a full diplomatic team and what appeared to be a significant military escort. Dr. Kepler fails. Sarah Chen met them at the docking bay, acutely aware that the next few hours would determine not just her daughter's future, but potentially the relationship between humanity and the rest of galactic civilization. The past 12 hours had been unlike anything in recorded history, as Emma continued to facilitate unprecedented cooperation between species that had maintained formal diplomatic distance for centuries. Admiral, Sarah greeted him with professional courtesy, though she could see the tension in his posture. "Welcome to Concordia," Dr. Chen, Foster replied curtly. "Where is your daughter, and what exactly has been happening here?" "Our long-range sensors have detected energy signatures that suggest massive technological activation throughout this entire sector." Before Sarah could respond, Emma appeared at her side, still carrying the original memory sphere and looking remarkably composed for a 9-year-old who had just revolutionized galactic civilization. "Hi, Admiral Foster," she said with the kind of polite friendliness that children reserve for adults they don't quite understand. "I'm sorry if we worried you. We were just playing with some of the other council members." Admiral Foster stared at the small girl whose activities had prompted a complete reorganization of Earth's diplomatic and military strategies. "Miss Chen, we need to discuss your return to Earth immediately. There are security concerns that require your expertise to be available to human authorities." "I know. The memory sphere showed me the patterns that worry and fear make in people's minds. But I think maybe there's a way to help with that, too." "What do you mean?" Foster asked, despite himself. Emma held up the memory sphere, which pulsed gently with internal light. "Would you like to see what we've been working on? It might help explain why everyone's so excited." Before Foster could object, Emma placed her hand on the sphere and whispered something too soft to hear. The device responded by projecting a holographic display that filled the entire docking bay with images of unprecedented beauty. Star systems connected by flowing streams of light, consciousness itself made visible as it bridged the gaps between different forms of life, and throughout it all, the simple joy of beings discovering that they were part of something infinitely larger and more wonderful than they had ever imagined. "This is what the Builder Network really was," Emma explained as the holographic galaxies swirled around them. "Not just a way to travel between stars, but a way to connect all consciousness everywhere." The memory spheres weren't just databases. They were friendship machines, designed to help different kinds of minds understand each other. Admiral Foster found himself experiencing something he had never felt before, a direct awareness of the vast community of conscious beings that filled the galaxy. For just a moment, he could sense the thoughts and feelings of creatures as different from humans as light is from stone, and yet somehow fundamentally similar in their basic desire for connection, understanding, and growth. "This is extraordinary," he admitted, his usual military bearing softening slightly. "But Miss Chen, surely you understand that technology of this magnitude requires careful study and controlled development. The security implications alone, that's what everyone says at first," Emma replied patiently. "But security from what? Once everyone knows how to connect properly, there's nothing to be afraid of anymore. Fear only happens when you forget that other people are basically the same as you on the inside." The holographic display shifted to show the current state of galactic civilization, no longer the rigid hierarchies and careful territorial boundaries that had characterized interspecies relations for millennia, but an organic network of cooperation and mutual aid that was growing stronger with each passing hour. "In the past 12 hours, Sarah explained to the Admiral, 47 different species have successfully activated dormant builder artifacts using Emma's methods. More importantly, they've begun sharing resources and knowledge in ways that were previously unthinkable. The Altarian Collective has offered to help the Zephyrians develop new harmonic technologies, while the crystalline entities are working with the Void Dancers on projects that neither could have imagined alone." Admiral Foster processed this information with the strategic mind that had made him one of Earth's most successful military leaders. And humanity's position in all this? We're teachers, Emma said simply, or maybe students. I'm not sure there's a difference anymore. Everyone wants to learn how to play the way humans do, and we want to learn all the games that other people know. But surely there must be species that view this development as a threat? Foster pressed. Not everyone in the galaxy shares humanity's values. Actually, Emma said thoughtfully, that's the really cool thing about the memory spheres. They don't just teach you how to use builder technology, they help you remember what your own values really are, underneath all the stuff that makes you think you're different from other people. To demonstrate, Emma approached the Admiral's military escort, a group of humans who had been trained to view the galaxy through the lens of potential threats and necessary defenses. Would you like to try something? She asked the lead security officer. The officer looked to Admiral Foster, who nodded reluctantly. Emma handed him one of her simple toys, a kaleidoscope that she'd been using since the beginning of her work with the memory sphere. Just look through it and turn it slowly, she instructed. Try not to think about what you're seeing, just enjoy the patterns. As the officer peered through the kaleidoscope, the memory sphere responded to his presence, creating subtle harmonics that seemed to resonate with something deep in human consciousness. Gradually, the officer's rigid military posture relaxed, and his expression shifted from professional alertness to something approaching wonder. I can see, he began, then stopped, struggling to put the experience into words. It's like everything makes sense for the first time. All the conflicts and competitions and struggles, they're not really necessary. They're just misunderstandings. That's what the memory spheres help you remember, Emma explained. Most problems between people happen because they forget that everyone wants basically the same things: to be safe, to be understood, and to create something beautiful together. Admiral Foster watched his security officer undergo a transformation that challenged everything Foster thought he knew about human nature and military necessity. And this effect is permanent?
It doesn't have to be, Emma said honestly.
People can choose to forget again if they want to, but most people don't want to once they remember what connection really feels like. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Keeper Selenith, whose opalescent form materialized in the docking bay through means that still mystified human science. Their presence immediately created a sense of calm that seemed to ease the tension between Earth's military delegation and the unprecedented situation they had encountered. Admiral Foster, Selenith said, their musical language rendered into perfect English by the universal translation field that had become a permanent feature of the station. We have been expecting you.
You have? Foster asked, unsettled by the implication that his arrival had been predicted.
The patterns of consciousness are quite clear once you learn to read them, Selenith replied. Your species approaches the unknown through protective strategies and careful analysis. This is neither wrong nor right. It is simply how human minds have learned to navigate uncertainty.
And you believe this approach is inadequate? Foster asked carefully.
Not inadequate, Emma interjected, just incomplete.
Humans are really good at protecting things and figuring out how stuff works, but we're also really good at playing and making friends and trying new things just to see what happens. We just sometimes forget about the second part when we're worried about the first part. Seleneth's translated voice carried notes of something that might have been approval. The youngling speaks wisely. Your species possesses a unique combination of traits: caution balanced with curiosity, protective instincts coupled with remarkable openness to new experiences. This is precisely why the memory spheres have responded so strongly to human consciousness.
Admiral Foster asked Belbelba how Professor asked whatever you are, a big problem.
Not uniquely suited, Selenith corrected, but suited in a way that allows you to serve as bridges between different types of consciousness. Your minds are flexible enough to understand multiple perspectives simultaneously, yet structured enough to maintain coherent identity during transformation. That's why teaching is so fun. Humans get excited about sharing cool things with other people, but we also want to make sure everyone stays safe while they're learning. So we're like safety friends for the whole galaxy. The implications of this observation settled over the gathering like a warm blanket. If Emma was correct, humanity's role in galactic civilization wouldn't be as conquerors or competitors, but as facilitators and teachers, helping other species discover capabilities they had always possessed but had forgotten how to access.
Admiral, Sarah said carefully, what if instead of taking Emma back to Earth, we invited Earth to come here? Foster looked confused. What do you mean? I mean establishing a permanent human presence at the Galactic Center, dedicated to teaching and learning alongside other species.
Emma's abilities aren't just hers. They seem to be amplified when she works with other humans who approach builder technology with the same combination of curiosity and caution that characterizes our species. Vasquez emerged from the inner station accompanied by several other human researchers who had been working with Emma over the past months. Each of them carried examples of previously dormant alien artifacts that they had successfully activated using methods derived from Emma's intuitive approach.
Admiral, Dr. Vasquez reported, we've discovered that Emma's abilities can be learned, at least partially, by other humans.
It requires a specific mindset, what Emma calls respectful curiosity, but it's definitely teachable.
Show him the harmony generator, Emma suggested excitedly.
Dr. Vasquez activated a crystalline device that had been brought by the Altarian delegation months earlier. Under his guidance, it began producing complex harmonic patterns that made the air itself seem to sing. The key is approaching the technology as if it's a conscious being that wants to cooperate rather than a tool that needs to be controlled. Admiral Foster found himself experiencing another moment of expanded awareness as the harmony generator's frequencies synchronized with human brainwave patterns. For just an instant, he could sense the vast network of consciousness that connected all life throughout the galaxy, not as an abstract concept, but as a living reality that he was part of. This is, he began, then stopped, realizing that words were inadequate to describe the experience. Big, Emma supplied helpfully. The first time is always really big, but then it gets more comfortable, like learning to ride a bicycle. Foster looked around at his security detail, all of whom had undergone similar transformations during their brief exposure to Emma's work. None of them appeared to be diminished or controlled by the experience. If anything, they seemed more alert and capable than before.
Chen, he said finally, I need to report back to Earth about what we've encountered here, but I'm beginning to think that our original assessment of the situation may have been incomplete.
Would you like to send a message that shows instead of just tells? Emma asked. The memory sphere can create recordings that let people experience things instead of just hearing about them. That's possible? Sure. Watch this. Emma placed her hands on the memory sphere and concentrated for a moment. The device responded by generating a data crystal that pulsed with the same gentle light as the sphere itself. Anyone on Earth can hold this and experience what we've been doing here. It's like a friendly way to visit without having to travel. Admiral Foster accepted the crystal with the reverence usually reserved for handling explosive devices. And this will allow people on Earth to understand what you've accomplished here? Better than understand, Emma replied. They'll get to feel what it's like to be friends with the whole galaxy. Human military personnel working alongside alien entities to create technologies that challenged everything he thought he knew about physics, consciousness, and the nature of reality itself. Yet somehow it all felt not just possible, but inevitable. Miss Chen, he said formally, on behalf of Earth's government, I'd like to request that you continue your work here, with full human support. It appears that what you're doing may be even more important than we initially understood. Emma beamed at him with the uncomplicated joy of a child whose parents have finally agreed to let her keep playing with her favorite toys.
Does that mean we can start the really big projects now? What really big projects? Foster asked, though part of him suspected he might not be ready for the answer. Emma looked around at the assembled humans and aliens,